welcome back to another edition of the Change My Mind podcast.
I won't change my mind because I don't have to, because I'm an American.
Yes, you are, and I'm Wesley Sykes, and through the other side of the ether is the Abraham Lincoln to my Robert E. Lee. It's Mr. Nicholas J. Esquire, vampire hunting president for hire.
Interesting label for yourself there. I mean, I'll take it all day, especially being a vampire hunter. Although I'd rather be a vampire hunter than the president, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's a lot less stress, I would imagine.
Some would say that's a safer occupation to have today, being the vampire hunter over the president.
Well, you see Wesley Snipes, he hasn't aged a bit, you know? He looks great for a vampire hunter, but you see all these like before and after photos of the presidents, and they age considerably.
This is a very, very good point. Honestly, we need to start telling more people about this so they can be aware. Wow, I never thought about that.
Maybe, yeah. So if you're graduating high school, that's right around the corner. You know, maybe instead of college, take up a trade, become a vampire hunter.
Yes, I think the show's over. We did it. We cracked the code.
Go.
You're welcome, everybody. Bye. See you next week.
Yes, but we aren't talking about vampire hunting or
Damn it.
the Civil War that actually took place, because this week we are conducting an exit survey on the latest A24 movie entitled Civil War, also not starring Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Evans or anyone like that. This is directed by Alex Garland and starring Kirsten Dunst.
Is there a sounder?
No, I got nothing.
Oh, no, I mean, for a sounder. I was going to say, I watched the wrong movie. I thought we were talking about Civil War, like Marvel's Civil War.
I know it was a great airport scene. You know, that's maybe the one thing that was missing from this movie, a good airport scene.
The fuck? Okay, well, all right. I'll figure it out, I guess, along the way. No, but yeah, I am very excited to dig into this movie. And warning for anybody who's new, again, like we're a spoiler-filled podcast, so we're breaking down a lot. Obviously, spent a few weeks since the movie came out, not to timestamp things, but just a warning because there are some important things that you won't want to know that we will absolutely be breaking down throughout the course of things.
Absolutely here. But before we get to all that, kind of a related intro question, I guess. Nick, would you rather be shot or stabbed?
I actually don't think that there's a debate here. I think it's shot. Because
good. Okay, I'm glad we're on the same side.
Yeah, I think stabbed is a lot more painful.
It's so personal too. Yeah,
that is also true. It is personal.
You feel it every inch. You know, it's like what does Talia al Ghul say in The Dark Knight Rises? It's the slowest knife that cuts the deepest.
Yeah, that like
you can just feel it. Yeah.
Like you get shot and boom. Like obviously it can be a little. Both can be very fatal, obviously. So it's like I don't know if there's a huge difference on that front, like a scientific front. But like I do know that if someone stabs you, they can twist the knife, and that's going to create more problems. Like you get shot, there ain't no twisting a bullet. This isn't Wanted. That's just in the movies, kids.
Yeah, and a bullet's in and out, or it gets lodged or something. But you got to pull the knife out. You're watching everything happen in real time.
Yeah, and isn't it also better if you accidentally, like, let's just say you fell on like a super sharp piece of like wood at home, right? And then it gets lodged in your side. You don't want to pull that out, right? You want to leave it there if you go before you go to the hospital.
That's a good question. My instinct is to agree with you, but then I also think like depending on what you're stabbed with.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, that it may, I don't know, bacteria, rust, I don't know, anything like that. Like that might not be good to stay in there, but that's not a doctor. Not a doctor.
Yeah, I know. That's I didn't even think about that. Yeah, because what if it's rusty? It's like, you would just think generally, I've always thought like, oh, I want to pull it out.
Stop the bleeding, right? Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
I don't know. Jeez, this is the kind of stuff they need to be teaching people. Like there's, vampire hunting over being a president, and then it's better to
have a first aid kit, and especially if you're a war-torn journalist, maybe it's good to keep one in that car of yours. I don't know. I don't know.
This is true. Yes. And all the first aid kits that we get to definitely help in both situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it would hurt. The Boy Scouts of America, they've fallen on tough times, much like the Catholic Church, but there's definitely a need and a place for the Boy Scouts, I think.
Yeah. I think there's, now we're getting into a conversation of like stuff that you don't learn. Like we joke about not learning stuff in school, but like there's like shop class stuff that you don't learn. Yeah. And like you've become a handyman at home, but it's like, I don't think you were learning
birdhouses this weekend, very handy.
So, but you weren't learning that at your school. I didn't learn that at my school. Like if neither of us went to vocational school, if you didn't go to vocational school in our era, you didn't learn that stuff.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. We did have in 8th grade, we had a shop class, but it wasn't anything like crazy. It
Hmm.
was an introduction to it because like again, our school there was a tech school right in town. So that was kind of like, all right, maybe if you're interested, we'll guide you towards that. But
Yeah, and I mean, and I get it being tough just from a safety standpoint because you look back like on the 80s, I'm sure, or in the 70s, I'm sure it was just the Wild West when it came to shop classes. You have teachers with, two fingers and a thumb. But so I get that difference, but at the same time, just for us to not know anything is like from school in that on that
that's
front is
that's potentially more dangerous, you know?
yeah, yeah, yes. Wow, well put. Look at us.
This is
Come
going to
on
be
today.
a very high level conversation today. I can already tell. Um, always high level. Nick got you were on the road this weekend here. Tell us about the what happened in the comic book minute.
Ah, a superb choice.
Yeah, the actual doctor of the DSG, Joe and I went to C2E2, which is basically Chicago Comic Con, but that is the title that they go by. We had an
Okay.
weekend, ton of creators out there that we've had on the show before, some that we haven't had on the show before. Got to do some interviews while we were there with creators. We actually also interviewed a couple of cosplayers too. Wes, you'll appreciate this. So
Mm,
one of the cosplayers that we interviewed was a guy dressed as Darth Vader. We saw a few Darth Vaders, quite a few impressive, well done costumes. This guy was one of them, and he was also one of them that was like a little bit taller than me. So we're both 6 foot range, and this guy's probably 6'4", maybe a little more. But
okay.
he has a helmet on. I see he's got some boots. I'm wondering like, okay, how tall is he actually? And I like that was like the first question I asked him is
Yeah.
like, well, I'm a bodybuilder. And I'm like, well, fuck me. Okay. Going. And I asked him after talking about that, I think I asked him, what made you decide to dress as Vader? Somehow that led to him telling me that he's also either, I think it was ex-military. So I was like, Jesus, like this guy's going to fold me up like an accordion. Like if I say another dumb thing, Jesus, but he was
Now
a nice guy.
that is a very interesting Venn diagram of hobbies and jobs and everything like that there.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. It was all came like it was wild. So but he was a real nice guy. We got to talk to a guy dressed as Red Hood. We saw a whole like empire like group of people. Like we saw it was like 4 Vaders, a Palpatine, Darth Maul, and then this massive slew of
Stormtroopers.
stormtroopers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually shit talked them, and I was like, you guys couldn't hit a broadside of a barn. I was very proud of myself for thinking of that. And then Joe, but anyways, so we did a lot of that. Did some great interviews, set up conversations for later on down the line for TLDR, but overall just had a friggin' outstanding time at it. And we'll be breaking it down more on TLDR this week. We're going to be focusing on that while doing what's new. So kind of like another little special because there was news that came out of that con that
Okay.
we wanted to talk about on the comic book front. But yeah, for the comics coming out this week, something that people may want to be on the lookout for, Deadpool and Wolverine World War III issue 1.
Mm.
I haven't got a chance to read this yet. I do actually, that just reminds me, I got to get those review copies together, but very excited to check this out. The cover looks kick-ass. Then there's also Blood Hunt issue 1, which is going to incorporate the Avengers, Spider-Man, Hunter's Moon, which is a new character out of like the Moon Knight sector of Marvel, who's pretty badass, and is being labeled as the bloodiest Marvel event ever. And
Oh.
Marvel's been getting pretty crazy with it recently. Like we have Wolverine stuff's been nuts. Ghost Rider stuff has been nuts. And then the guy who's writing this has been writing Moon Knight, and he got pretty vicious in the course of things with Moon Knight as well. So maybe something worth checking out there as well. From Image, we got Bear Pirate Viking Queen, which I'm sure that title, you're like, what the hell is going on?
I like those 3 words smashed together. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was Joe and I got a chance to interview the writer of that series. He's that former King Spawn writer. We've had him on the show a few times. It was a wild visual experience, like watercolor style art, very epic. There's one image that's later on in the issue. I could show you it later, Wes, but I'm not going to spoil it for the people right now. But it's just like, that was like the moment I've read this issue a couple months ago, and it's still sticking with me. So this is a 3-issue miniseries, but like a double-sized issue, so it'll be worth checking out. And then we also got the Nightwing annual coming out. Obviously, Nightwing's been one of the better ongoing comics from the big 2 over the last couple years, so worth checking that out if you haven't been reading it already. But that is everything for the comic book minute, loaded one.
I love it. Glad you had a fun time out in Chicago. You take them to both deep dish pizza spots?
We just did Luz. He's done Giordano's before, and I took him to Luz, and he was like, "Okay, I get it." Like I didn't need to. Nothing else needed to be said.
Oh,
So,
there was no bias or anything. You just let him taste it and then say, "Okay, make up your mind." And he
yeah,
chose Lou
he
Amado's, huh?
he just right away, like like I didn't even ask him. Like, well, actually, no, I did ask him. I said, "So what do you think?" He's like, "No, I understand. Like, I get it." And we had to go to Wrigley, taking a Cubs game where Verlander was throwing, and
Mm.
we're kind of obviously this is stuff from that I was going to say in the Discharge Depot, but oddly enough, Wes, I was planning on doing C2E2, and then one of my old teammates who you met at the bachelor party texted me. He's like, "Hey, are you still coming in for this weekend?" And then I find out that Northwestern it was playing Purdue at Wrigley Field on Friday. So
Oh,
yeah, and that's like a $15 ticket, great seats and everything like that. So great, getting to see all of my old teammates and whatnot. So kind of turned into like a little mini reunion too for me.
awesome. At Wrigley too. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
And then you went to the Cubs game the next day?
the day before we went to the Cubs game. Yeah.
Gotcha,
But
gotcha,
yeah,
yeah.
they've only done it. It's crazy. Like again, I didn't know this was happening. It's only the third time we've had a game at Wrigley. I was there for the first one,
Mhm.
and it's like I'm still kind of blown away, like because clearly the odds of that happening right when I'm there is just
It was meant to be. You were meant to be there.
apparently. What do you know? But yes, that is the comic book minute in my half of the Discharge Depot.
I love it. Yeah, well, spoil it a little. I'm sure you got plenty to share in the Discharge Depot
Yeah,
coming up from that weekend. So
yeah.
nothing too wasted there. But the main topic, Civil War and exit survey. Nick, what is the synopsis?
A journey across a dystopian future America following a team of military embedded journalists as they raced against time to reach Washington, D.C. before rebel factions descend upon the White House.
All right, this is written and directed by Alex Garland, starring Kirsten Dunst as Lee, who I absolutely loved here. You know what I love about Kirsten Dunst? She's like a former Hollywood starlet. You know, she was like the It Girl in all the Spider-Man movies and everything, and she's like aged so gracefully. You can tell like there's the big trend about like Botox and everything in Hollywood celebrities. You know, she's like just wearing her age on her face and still looks great. You know,
Yeah.
I find that very. I appreciate that in this
Mhm.
day and age.
Yeah.
Wagner Mora as Joel, who is your Pedro Pascal light.
Dude, I
Right?
mean, seriously, doesn't he remind you of him right when you look at him?
Absolutely, smokes a great
Crazy.
cigarette too.
Oh,
Give that to him. Yeah,
that is no small feat, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah, he was really sucking down the cigarettes there on that one. There, that's
What's
good
the stamp
stuff.
of approval on that is big.
This is Callie Spaney as Jesse, Nick Offerman as the president. This is what I also like about this movie. That it's a slim cast, and none of the names are like super. You know, they don't really get too deep into like people's backstories. You know,
Yep.
you just have Nick Offerman as the president. That's all he's called. You have Jefferson White as Dave, Nelson Lee as Tony, Evan Lai as Bohai, Stephen McKinley Henderson as Sammy, Vince Pisani as the concierge, who could forget his performance, Justin James Boykin as the American soldier, Greg Hill as Pete, and Edmund Donovan as Eddie. I don't even know who the last quarter of those characters are. It doesn't even really matter.
They don't, and Jesse Plemons didn't get a credit.
He is an uncredited cameo in this because he was not supposed to be in the movie at all. The person who had the role backed out, and then they're like, "Hey, Kirsten, call up your husband."
They backed out,
Or something happened. I don't know.
Okay.
Whatever the case was. Yeah,
I know. I saw that it was a last minute thing, but it's still like, that's one of the performances that's going to stick with most people, and obviously it's one of the things that brought people in. I think
absolutely, yeah.
Wes, when we first saw, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's get the box office and critic reception real quick. So 64.5 million worldwide has been hauled in on this for this movie. 49.1 million domestic, and 25.5 of that million came in the opening weekend domestically. 7.6 out of 10 on IMDb, 81-72 split on Rotten Tomatoes, and then a 2.7 out of 5 on Google reviews, with 75% of Google users liking this movie. So wild numbers.
Yeah, divisive, provocative film, right? I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, definitely was. And that's where I was kind of starting to dabble into as we get closer to our score and tweet length reviews. When I first saw this announced, I was like, okay, this looks really interesting. Like when I saw the trailer, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. Like this is like it's on the nose, is it like that you have like a very much an uphill battle. But then when you see that Jesse Plemons scene in the trailer, it's like, okay, that's nuts. That's wild. Like what now I feel like a little more comfortable or confident in this movie's gonna come out and be really good. And just again, I get it was last minute, but that he's not credited is kind of wild.
Yeah, no, I kind of like that. I think that works out well. And I think the direction, the point of view in which they told this story ended up working out, I think, ultimately in its favor. We'll get into exactly why or why other people may not think that. But, I think it works out because then the disappointment would obviously be if they told a one-sided story from one side of the aisle, then you're pissing off the other side, right? So it's, I think, just staying out of the room, to continue with that metaphor, and kind of taking like a bird's eye view of it was probably the best choice for the movie.
Yeah, and then that kind of leads into our score and tweet length review. So I gave this a 96 out of 100. Just a little reminder for everybody, because I feel like I haven't gone this high in a while. If I generally start out my grading at a 95 and then work down from there. And this actually met my requirements and then went up a tick. I don't start at 100. This was stunning, so well done, exceeded my expectations, and an amazing performance by the lead cast. And the writing too was also like very well done. And we'll get into that more a little later, but like very comfortable. Like this is like comfortable in my grading, but this movie was mind blowing.
So is this your favorite movie of the year? Was this higher than Dune, you think?
I think it's higher rated than Dune. So yeah, I got to say, I mean, this Dune was awesome. This impressed me more than Dune did, though, I think.
Exceeded expectations. Maybe you had lower expectations for it, and it was like, wow, this blew me away.
Yeah, I think from the way they told the story, as opposed to like Dune had is a very interesting story, but there's like so many other like massive things going on. I feel like that while I don't think that there were a lot of like flaws with Dune 2, I do feel like the nature of having this sci-fi otherworldly stuff, there are things that can be maybe masked a little more easily, where it's harder to, because it's unfortunately this feels like it could be like 5 years from now. You know what I mean? Like that's a tough task to take on.
Oh, and Alex Garland's your guy, right? He did 28 Days Later.
Oh, that's right. Okay. I mean,
even more so there. I think we are close, but the score may not be as close. I give it an 87 out of 100. In a vacuum, I think this is a great action movie that the audience is immediately engaged with, whether that's through the cinematography, the action, the performances, or the thought-provoking commentary. I think this movie kind of sticks with you for a little bit. But I can't ignore Garland's lack of perspective on the issue here, and that point of view. When it's clear he's capitalizing on a hot political climate. It's like not have some sort of explanation to it, and then market and build this movie during an election year at a time where the political climate's very hot. It's so hot right now. It feels a little disingenuous almost.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you've talked about many times, like on the show, like when it comes to the perspective. By the way, he did 28 Days Later. He did Dread, which I also like.
Oh, okay,
Carl Urban. Ex Machina, which is also really well done. So yeah, I didn't and he's wrote most of these. I know he directed Ex Machina, and I think that was his directorial debut. But yeah, like he's done quite a few things that I like, and I need to get better about learning this kind of stuff, because that's he's my guy apparently. Look at that.
Yeah, he is. He absolutely is. All right, so let's dive into it now. Enough teasing. Can you describe your thoughts and feelings about this movie in a single word? If so, what is it?
Impressed.
I
will dig into that more in a second, but can you describe it in one word?
Yeah, so I'm torn. And that's kind of how I left the movie. I'm just torn on like which way I want to go, because I feel like depending on, I could kind of be swayed either way, but I'm leaning towards, obviously I like this movie. It's an 87, gave it an 87, but I get wanting to tell this story from the journalistic perspective. Like I said, that's kind of like the unbiased, objective observer there, right? But it feels like a bit of a cop-out, like I said, to release this movie called Civil War in an election year and use current events as plot devices and not explain the reasoning or lead up to it. But I can also appreciate the idea of, again, having these leaving it open-ended and on either side, the beginning and the end, to be able to have conversations like you and I are going to have right now. So exactly, but I also think it's, to ask the audience to not view it without a political bias is a big ask.
Yeah, it is. And I remember talking. So I saw this a little bit before you did because, as we said, it's been out for a little bit. And I actually
Mhm.
talked to somebody else about like seeing the movie. And they're like, "Oh, I'm not going to see that movie just because it's like it feels so like it can be such a touchy thing." And I get that, but that's part of why I was so impressed by it because it wasn't until I think it was like a third or three quarters of the way through the movie. What like they had these driving scenes that was kind of like used as transition moments. There was like
Mhm.
30 seconds to a minute and in that like one of those later moments, I was like, wait a minute, I just realized I don't know what the reasoning is behind this. Like what led to this? Like what led to the United States becoming fractured in the manner that it was. So like that impressed me. That blew me away because like I didn't because I go in just thinking like let's see what it is, and I was curious what is it going to be. I thought about that before the movie, but
Mhm.
I never I was sucked in by like the characters and their acting, and then as it went along, just the way they created the world and just how vicious it was. That blew me away.
And I guess in passing, we do kind of get the reasoning for it, right? They say they mention the Antifa massacre that Lee photographed that really launched her career.
Hmm.
Whenever that was, she's in her 40s, I would imagine,
Yeah.
in this movie. So let's say 20 years. Like it's 20 years
Mm,
before this. That's when it started. They talk about the president giving himself a third term and
that would be
shooting
the closest.
journalists sight unseen. That was
Yeah.
kind of the thought process there, right? Why Sammy didn't want Wagner. That's not the actor's name, but Wagner and Lee to go to DC in the first place, right? They shoot journalists sight unseen there. That was that
Mhm.
kind of conversation in the hotel in New York City. So you get some things for it, but
Yeah.
it's not never like outwardly said this is why.
Yeah, and that's a good point about the president's third term and with the journalists too, because it does. It's like when we talk about show don't tell, it is still telling, but at the same time, it's a level of like we're still not saying this was the thing. We don't know what the catalyst moment was, but we're painting a picture through like normal conversations.
Yeah, it's not like an exposition dump with a monologue from a main character. It says like 5 years ago, and then you get kind of
Yeah.
like the abridged version of what happened, right? It's just
I
kind of said in passing, like you're along for the ride as well.
Right. And I know you thought exposition dump would be what we might get. I kind of thought it would be flashback that we might get now that we're
Hmm.
digging into it more. And we didn't get either one of those things. And I do think that was the right choice. And that's where again, like when we're talking about like it being polarizing, I feel like that does take some of that away from it because this is what happens. This is the aftermath. And then like that's where, the journalist exciting, like you and I talking beforehand, and you brought it up now with like there's like a commentary in some ways on the state of like journalism that covers politics.
Yeah.
And I think that this like I as soon as you said it, it was like, yes, absolutely 100%. But it didn't hit me fully. At least again, I've watched it, a little before you did, so maybe I forgot, but it didn't hit me in that way as I was watching it because, like, well, it's wartime. Like you're in it. Like there's no like you're just like you're trying to document things, but you're also trying to survive the whole thing because
Hmm.
we're seeing where Lee and Jesse and Joel are all in the course of this. They're right in the thick of it, and like anything can happen, and it's just you can't worry about that kind of stuff. You just got to document and keep your head down and move out of the way. So it was like, but we don't get that now. And in when it comes, and obviously it's not wartime. And people who are sitting in studios aren't worried about their safety, but at the same time, there's like it's not down the middle. It's just everything's always charged in one direction or the other.
And what I thought was interesting and kind of like an effective way to, again, maybe make up for that lack of, leading up to getting information on what happened previously. You get these conversations between Lee and Jesse about their family. And they're like, they both live on a farm and pretend like nothing's happened. So it's like
Yeah.
there's pockets and parts of this country where they're unfazed by this all, but yet, you're driving down, I don't know, 95 or whatever on their way down. And it's like the whole highway's blown up.
Yeah, it looks like it's a scene out of The Walking Dead. That's legitimately what I
Yeah.
thought, and it's just like, and then you go to was it Pittsburgh or somewhere in Pennsylvania, right? Not Pittsburgh. It was somewhere in Pennsylvania though, where they went into that town where they go into the store, and she's like,
Yeah.
Another example of like what you're talking about. Like, they have our own farm. They have a whole community. I know they still had guys sitting up on
I
a
was gonna
building.
say, yeah, right.
It was still like not. It wasn't what they were seeing. Like what Lee and them.
Yeah, and I thought that was an interesting scene too. I also thought, on the journalistic kind of commentary on journalism as an industry, that kind of started to hit home to me. It kind of hit home to me on that last scene where Joel, wants his quote from the president, who's ready to get killed pretty much. And he's like, what do you I need a quote? What do you have to say for yourself, essentially?
Yeah.
And he's like, please don't let them kill me. And he's like, that's enough. And that was so unsatisfying for me because essentially we go on this ride with them, 300 miles or so, however many miles it was. And they go through all this death, and you're trying to get this story, and they go through so much turmoil and everything just to get this point across. And he doesn't even get the full question out, and he doesn't care to get the information at that point.
Yeah.
So it's like he became ideologically captured.
Yeah.
In that moment, which is what I think was like the commentary on the journalist industry, is that this could be the result of what we get. This could be the result of having extremely biased journalism.
Ooh, like I'm seeing it more now as you're saying that, because now it's like that's the result of them getting like the investment level kind of changing, because when you lose who is the actor that died in the course of it all? Sammy. Oh yeah. So Stephen McKinley Henderson. So after he dies, obviously that kind of charges things, and then they're in the heat of the battle, and then they're going there as part of like the pursuit, and then they see everything, and then also in the course of it all, okay, again we said spoilers, okay, so massive one here.
Oh yeah.
Like Lee dies like right before they see the president, so there's all this different things that change, and then it's like that leads to that moment where maybe he would have beforehand, like before what happened to Lee, maybe even before what happened to Sammy, maybe he would have asked a follow-up question if they were there, or if at least one of them was there. By that point, though, he was so like shifted in a direction and around the people who were up opposite the president that it led to him being like, what you're talking about, just ask for that. And then
I've suffered so much because of your lack of leadership that I don't care what you have to say at that point. So it completely like ruins like their initial goal of what they were trying to achieve.
Yeah, in the end, though, they still are the ones with a quote, so that's something.
That's true. Not much of a quote, though.
No, not much of a quote. But if he's a good writer, he can paint a good picture of what that whole scene, because that was an amazing scene.
Well, and that's my other question. What did Joel do? What was his role, do you think? Because they said he works in Reuters, and like we have the photojournalist. I was like, is he a producer? Is he like an on-air reporter? Is he a writer?
I was confused by that a little bit. That would probably be the one, like when I talk about like in my grading, if like it would probably that's a thing that probably wouldn't like allow it to go up as further than 96.
It's a small thing. I would just, as two people in the biz, I'm like, what does this guy do? Because Sammy was the writer, and then you have the two photojournalists there, and then they even show the video journalists who are embedded with the Western forces.
Yes,
who are riding on there, the Asian woman, right?
Yes. So let me ask you this, or did I cut you off there? I apologize.
No, that was it. No.
So in that scene, you're bothered by the question thing, and I get that. I was, as they're watching that final scene, and I get it, like the character Jesse had just gone through a ton for a litany of different reasons, like most of all being what happens with Lee right in front of her. But in that moment, she still like gets those pictures, and but then we get to the office.
Mm-hmm.
She takes like I obviously this kid was like the character was talented. I thought the performance was outstanding.
I thought she did a really good job. She was frustrating at times, but I think the character was supposed to be frustrating. She was supposed to be a bit of a foil to everybody.
Frustrating in the way that, yes, you put that well, like frustrating in the way that she was supposed to be, as opposed to other times where we see, like, 'cause she was like, this actress is older, like, but when we see like, younger, like more so kid actors, it's like, no, like it doesn't make sense. But like everything she did, I thought like from a writing standpoint was well done, and her performance was great. But this was my only thing, and it's a small thing, but like she's in that, she gets the picture after the shot, right after the president is killed in that scene. I would have thought you'd want to have like the before, if you get like the during, then that's great. But like you want at least the before and the after. Like get him in his final moment and then get him right afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you there.
Okay,
You want the emotion. You want the emotion on the face to capture the moment there, right? So it's
Yeah.
like this guy's like literally on his last breath. He's the president of the United States. He's the reason for the downfall of the country, and he's about to die. The dead body is super effective. Obviously of kind of telling its own story, but to
Sure.
get that human lifeful image, or emotion on their face. I think that
100%.
goes a different,
At least, if nothing else, to at least have it. And I mean, I guess like they're dealing with they're dealing with actual film, right? Those aren't digital.
She was,
Yeah.
but Jesse had, or I'm sorry, Lee had the digital cameras.
Okay, that's what it was. Okay, so I
Mhm.
mean, she probably knew her amount that she had. Maybe that's what it was. But that's like my only thing with that scene was like personally was like take the picture. I was like take the picture. Like, what are you waiting for, kid? Get at least make sure you get one. What are you doing?
And then you get like the photo that's developing as the credits start to roll. It's like the Abu Ghraib photos, right? It's like them
Mhm.
smiling over the body like they just killed like a 10-point buck.
Yes, yeah, and yeah. And that was that I get, but it's like you probably have extra film. Like, so if you're worried, like you can fill it in after. Like, don't worry, the president's not going anywhere at that point. But
Yeah,
you're not
yeah,
going to
yeah.
see him alive for long. So like, what are you doing?
No, I agree. More than one word to describe this movie, but I think this was a good opening primer to the question there.
Yes, 100%.
And this was another thing that was really just kind of glossed over, wasn't meant to be made a big deal, but I think it's ripe for a conversation. What did you think of the way that the country was split up?
So I think like most people, I was confused originally when we saw the Western forces were
Mhm.
California and Texas. Then, so for those who don't know, we have the Western forces, and they're kind of the major driving bus, and then you have the loyalist states. So basically, the ones that are still loyal to the president, and that is the majority of the country from at least a state standpoint. Then you have the Florida Alliance, which is like Oklahoma and like a lot of the southeast.
SEC country.
Yeah, pretty much SEC country. Yeah, good call. And then you have this was the only thing that confused me. You had the New People's Army, which is pretty much part of the North Midwest, and then mostly like the
All
Northwest.
the northern states, pretty much from Minnesota to Washington.
And I just like I felt like we heard mentions of Florida throughout the course of it. We like the loyalist stuff was obviously like very apparent because we're seeing loyalist versus Western forces. It
Mhm.
seemed like the whole time, but that other Northwest group, that one felt a little like just
Yeah, what
not a
was
good
kind of like
fit.
a non-player here, and the loyalist states. I mean, it's all the 13 colonies. The Carolinas fought off a I guess raid by the Florida Alliance, or
Yeah,
Florida
that's
Alliance
right.
tried to get the Carolinas to join them, so that didn't happen. And then you get Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Missouri, and it kind of like goes to Colorado and down to like New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada. So it kind of like
Yeah.
stretches a long way. Which my thought is, okay, so those are the loyalist states. So that means they all support the fascist president, which kind of sucks being from Massachusetts. You're a New Hampshire guy now. You'd be
Hmm.
folded in there.
Yeah.
But you would also think with all of those states and that much coastline power, port power, um, they would be able to get goods,
Hmm.
military bases, all that stuff. To be like, I know California and Texas could be like their own countries in a lot of ways. They're pretty
Yep.
self-sufficient, and great locations of themselves, but also port states. But still, you would think those two states don't have enough ammunition to keep up with all of those states. I mean, that's like you said, half the country pretty much.
Well, I think it comes down to what we were just touching on, and I forget if this was before the show or after, but like or during. But you have Missouri, which is where Lee's family or
Hmm.
Jesse's family is living, and then
Jesse's, yeah.
Lee's family's in Colorado, is what it
Hmm.
was. But they're just like sitting on their farm, living life, and just waiting this thing out. And then we saw it in Pennsylvania in that one town where it's like, again, there's still like, armed people there, but they're trying to like just kind of keep life as it is. And I think that's why this, like, you have so many loyalist like states. And it's just, we're just, most of them are just like, yeah, okay, we're just gonna like ride this thing out and just kind of keep
That's
trying to do
true.
our thing.
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of that is. I mean, you think like Alaska and Hawaii are loyalist states. They're just probably like, all right, we'll just let the 48 figure it
Alaska
out.
was a neutral state that the president's press secretary or chief of staff or whatever was trying to say, like, grant him amnesty to either Alaska or Greenland before they shot her.
Oh, that's right.
So,
that's right.
so like that was like, I thought that was kind of weird. Also a big ask, like you're not asking to go to like, I don't know, the middle of the country, Chicago or something like that for a tribunal. You're like, no, fly me to Greenland and then we can figure this out. It's like, no, you're getting out of here. That's your escape plan.
Yeah, no way. Yeah, I got a better idea. No fucking way.
Yeah. President doesn't really seem like a good guy. I don't know who he sent out in the what's his armored limousine called? The Beast.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Is that the vice president? It's a lady. Is that his wife? Like who is that?
Yeah,
that he just
I
sends
forgot
out
about that. Yeah, the decoys that they got screwed. Yeah, jeez, it's just
But yeah, I think that's an interesting way. It might be again kind of a neutral, a way to kind of stay unbiased, to kind of like again not think left or right or blue or red in this. So maybe that's a smart choice on Garland's part, but. We talked about this. I think this was before on air, but the idea that Texas and California could be, joining forces. It's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
And all of their petty, maybe social differences, whether how they view how life should be lived in the country, get put on hold when it's, they what they deem to be like an existential threat.
Yeah, and Garland in some interview like that, he explained that, and I thought that like. I think this is why I've liked so many of his movies that he's written, because it seems like he just has where this is like a movie that it can like we talk about like how like it comes out this year and it's like, oh, okay, like we're sure you have a movie like this year in a very divisive time for the country, a little cheap, okay. But then the way he wrote this, there's so many layers and details and things taken into account in the course of it. And I think he does that in some of his other movies that I've seen that he's written. And that's why I've liked them so much. Like Ex Machina, if I'm not mistaken, is the one that my wife showed me that one. And she was like, very much like, this is a movie that might
Oscar
bug
Isaac.
You a little bit.
Yeah,
it
Oscar does bug you. Yeah.
Domhnall Gleeson, Alicia Vikander. And it's like, this will bug me, especially because it's like, it's kind of like AI kind of, robots and whatnot. But I still like, that was a very well done movie. Yes, there was stuff that was frustrating, but it was very well done.
And it doesn't give you an ending because just like Civil War, you don't really know what the aftermath is after the president's killed. Once I forget her name, but the AI, let's call her Ex Machina, gets released out into the world, you don't know what happens. You're left to kind of fill in the blanks there.
Right. And then when you have it with 28 Days Later, like it's implied that there's a happy ending because like they've been, and obviously there's a sequel. So you would think that these characters are fine, but we don't see them in the sequel. It's not like it leaves us on like this moment where we think the plane saw them, in this moment at the very end of the movie,
right,
to save them. But it's like, we're not sure. Like they still might have to wait a little bit longer. And that's kind of, it seems like that's kind of Garland's like, he likes to do that at the end of movies, and I appreciate that.
I can appreciate that as well. Speaking of appreciation, what was the most rewatchable scene, Nick?
I think there's no question that it's.
Well, let's say let's save that for last. How about some honorable mentions? We're in agreement on that scene.
Okay, so there's a scene before Jesse Plemons' scene with the car swap. I just want to note that was extremely anxiety-inducing for me.
Oh, what an idiot Jesse is! Like, come on.
Yeah, yes, Jesse the character, not Jesse Plemons.
Yeah.
A lot of that thrown around now, but yes, I that was just the kids just like, I get you're trying to be fearless, but like this is not the time for that. I think the final move on the Capitol in general was all very, very well done.
Yeah, that's like 20 minutes or something too, right? I mean, that's a great set piece.
Yes, the bit you talked about where they brought the decoy cars out was really well done. If I was to pick one thing specifically though from that, I do think it was like the final assault inside the White House. That was amazing. That was a wild experience because you have we've already lost one of the four main characters in the course of this movie at that point. And Jessie is like this like wild bat out of hell in there. And she's doing a great job, but it's like, dude, you got to like
But she's really putting her neck out there too at the
Yes,
same time. Yeah.
and Lee is like just not there at this moment. Like I think was she the one
She had
that
like
realized?
emotional breakdown, you know?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's like was she the one that realized no, this is a decoy? Like she
Yes.
was,
Yep.
yeah. So
Mhm.
she was like, I thought she had like gotten it together, but at the same time, she was still like going through it, and or at least coming off just going through it. So that was all nuts. And then the what is it, the Western Alliance like soldiers, they were doing like their whole thing, and they're trying to like be respectful of the journalists in some capacity and keep them safe. So it was just crazy.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think that whole scene is was really well done. The scenes of what would be like, I guess, the loyalist states fighting from the Lincoln Memorial, and like
Mm,
the idea of like using that as cover, like to not to get, I guess, too political, but
mm.
the everything going on in Gaza between Israel and Palestine. They say Hamas puts their headquarters in schools and hospitals and things, and
Oh,
to hopefully use them as a shield, knowing that Israel doesn't want to put risk civilian lives.
mm,
It's like a similar type of tactic there. Like, this is America's history here. Maybe they don't want to destroy it. If they want to preserve the country that they're fighting for,
mhm,
they want these memorials to still stand in place. It doesn't work,
mhm.
but
Right.
I think that's an interesting war tactic that you
Yeah.
see played out in a couple different ways.
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah. So
Um,
to have all this stuff like at the Capitol though be like we're like again, we know the scene that we're like is like the best scene. It was the most captivating. We'll get to that in a second. I know you got some more to break down, but for the best action scene to be the final bit, I don't know that always happens for us like with movies, and it's just I
mhm.
think that's very satisfying for me with this one.
Yeah, no, absolutely there. And the first kind of follow along there, what Joel says, he sees all that fire at night and he's like, I'm getting so hard watching this stuff.
Yeah.
So they go check out that war the next morning. I don't know if it's on a campus or what the deal is, but you got some guys in Hawaiian shirts kind of firing each other close range type of a shootout
Yeah.
style. And you get this great needle drop moment. It's De La Soul, Say No Go. And I think they use a Hall and Oates sample.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm off on that,
I
but
can't remember.
it's a great kind of like light, floaty, fun song amidst all of this like chaos and terrible things that are unfolding there. I mean, Jesse sees her first person die.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's the first person she sees die there.
Well,
Uh,
she did see the whole like at least as the photographer because she did see that explosion. Remember the
Oh, that's right. Yeah, how they meet up and everything. No,
Yeah.
you're right. That's fair. No, I don't
No,
know. If
it was
the
different.
hanger guy, at the gas station.
Oh, jeez.
I don't know
Oh.
if that worked out. That was a cool scene. Not as great as the shootout, but we were talking before whether this is like an anti-war movie or not, and it's kind of like the answer is kind of like yes and no, right? Because it's showing you all the horrible things that happen in war, but then you get these like fun, music soundtracks to these like horrible scenes that are happening, and it's like me as an audience member, I'm like I'm having a great time.
That
So it's
was
like it's
yeah.
kind of like a weird juxtaposition.
That is one thing that like didn't stick with me, and I am gonna rewatch this. I think like I'm not gonna rewatch it in theaters. I'll need some time because this is something you need to absolutely be engaged to watch. But that was the one thing that like
For
didn't
sure, yeah.
catch me in the same way. I very much felt like no, this is not a glorification of it. This is rough. But I'm curious. Like when I watch it, I'll be on the lookout for that moment with was the De La Soul.
Yeah. And of course the gas station scene that kind of sets like that
Oh
eerie tone, and
yeah.
like even the other all of their little pit stops along the way, but the sniper shootout with the Christmas display set up
Oh
with like
yeah,
some
that's
guy in
right.
the house, like kind of a microcosm for the movie as a whole. Like, they're like, we don't know who we're shooting, we just know there's one guy shooting at us, and like that's kind of like the audience perspective. Like, you don't really know who the good guy is, we just know that there's shit going down and people are trying to protect themselves
Yep.
or fight for
100%.
their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool too, and,
Good
and
call.
the dialogue back and forth, and that was pretty cool. He's,
Yeah.
he
Those are both
looks over
very
at the girl. He's like, "What do you think we're doing here?" And she explains it pretty simply.
Yeah, yeah. Those were both pretty anxiety inducing scenes. Like the gas station one, I was like, is everybody gonna make it out of this one? Is something gonna go
Hmm.
down? Like, I don't know, man. It's like they did a really good job of like making the main characters not feel safe at any point. Even with like Lee's the only one, like she's got to be there for the long haul of this thing. And Jesse, even actually, I would say I didn't fully feel Jesse was always safe. In the course.
Well,
of it,
she certainly didn't put herself in a position to be safe all the time.
Yeah, 100%. And Joel did. I didn't like Joel. Again, we're spoiling things. Joel made it through the whole movie. I wasn't sure that he was going to make it through the whole thing either.
Yeah, and that's what we talk about the stakes in X-Men, and certainly our last episode with Julia and Eric Lewald there talking about how great it is that they killed off one of your favorite characters, Gambit, and potentially, well, not potentially after the episode, but what we thought was Magneto at the time, and adding stakes to it, right? And that's our big indictment on a lot of other Marvel properties. Is that everyone always lives, or you think they're dead, and then they come back, and then whatever. But to kill off again half of your main cast, is pretty good. And then the other two journalists as well, which kind of work in conjunction with that main cast, even though they weren't major players. It's effective.
We essentially saw 8 journalists like at the center of things, like because we had the two that were with the Western Alliance at the end. Only half of them made it out of this movie.
Oh yeah. See, there we go. Yeah, absolutely.
That's mistakes.
And part of that reason was because of Jesse Plemons' character, who is a scene stealer, maybe a movie stealer. Yep. Maybe it's concerning how well he plays sociopaths, because he does a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, it's I'm worried for Kirsten Dunst, because that's her man. You're proud of that?
But it lived up to the hype, and I don't think showing that scene in promotional trailers and stuff like that did it any disservice. I think it only got everyone more excited for when that moment was happening.
That's
then you really locked in.
That's the most mind-blowing bit of it all. It's like you gave us some important chunks of that, but it was still everything about it. It was so good. It didn't matter that we knew it was coming. There were points where I was like, okay, when are we going to get it? When are we going to get it? And when we got it, it's like, whoa, I didn't know this is how it was going to go down. It was nuts. It was great. And in the end too, I know who's the character Nelson. So it was Nelson Lee's character Tony, and then I'm not sure the other actor. Which was it Evan Lai?
Maybe Bahai, but
yeah,
yeah.
Like they kind of. It seems like they're the ones to blame here, but at the same time, like they might have gotten stopped no matter who was going through.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if anything, they kind of stopped, allowed the other group to kind of intervene. Because had they not interacted or anything like that, it probably would have been the press truck that got pulled over.
Yeah, right. Yep. But in the end, Jesse Plemons' character, and then he had some other people there that I don't think they had any lines that they did. It was just little things, but he's just like, it's just like you have these 4 forces, right? And then it's like Jesse Plemons, like him and his people are like their own thing.
But that's where I think it's effective, because the country is so big, and then what you may initially start out on one side, but then you have your own little things that you want to incorporate. It essentially has like a cult, so you're making your own decisions based on whatever you deem is necessary, and you're not really abiding by. You see him have the army fatigues on, but all the patches are torn off, so you don't know which side he's on, and he doesn't even necessarily have to be on a side. Maybe he's just a warlord leader in his local town, and he's just like taking damage.
I think that's what it is. Like he was very much like he might have, like you said, he might have started on a side, but he just at some point was like, "There's all this chaos going on. I can take my power now. I can do what I want to do. I'm just going to do my own thing because everybody's too distracted." And there are plenty of people who just like, he's still in that northeast corner of the country, so he's dealing. I'm sure he's dealing with plenty of people who are like, "I don't want to get involved with this." Maybe he's still, maybe they might have been in Pennsylvania at that point, so I'm not sure, but it's like we don't want to get involved. So then you go and like, okay, well, this is a moment for me to take what I want. And I mean, we can clearly see he did a lot of that. It was brutal, man.
And just like the casual way that he's throwing lime onto these mass graves, is like pretty crazy. It's just, again, like the sociopath that he's able to play is so impressive, because like it's the things that he doesn't react to, or the things like how mild mannered he seems while like keeping a finger on the trigger.
Yeah, so Breaking Bad is another show. I mean, another instance where we see him play like this character who's on the wrong side of things, but there's like a calmness to him. And if
Mhm.
I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but in Breaking Bad, the character he played was kind of more not he wasn't like smart, like he was a bit of a dope, right? If I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But he still has this calmness to him, and he brings that same calmness to this character, but there's
Mhm.
so much more going on with this guy. And I'm like very impressed how he's able to take that same kind of skill that he has as an actor and then translate it to two very different characters and not at all make them feel similar whatsoever, other than
Well,
that one element.
I would say even to a third character is the police officer who plays in Game Night. I don't know if you saw that
I
with
haven't.
Rachel McAdams and Jason Bateman, but he played like it's an awkward silence. It's these long stares, and it's in a more comedic fashion. But it works uh, to be able to feel that awkward or that tension through the screen. I think is super effective. So
Yeah, and
without doing
actually,
like anything really.
in to again to another different degree, we have Love and Death, which was the
Oh yeah,
Candy
yeah, yeah.
Montgomery. Yeah, and
Hmm.
he's on that side of it. And there's a lot of moments where he's like sits like just in like the development. So he doesn't say
Hmm.
anything, doesn't have a crazy reaction, nothing. And he's kind of just like the average dude. Like he's just not so yeah, that's another time he's utilizing that, but in a very different way. So he's just, I
Hmm.
mean, he's a great actor. If
He's the
people didn't know
man.
that. Yeah.
He's the man. And definitely the best scene in the movie there. What do you think will age the best from this movie, Nick?
I'm hoping that there like a resurgence will happen for Kirsten Dunst after this movie because she didn't. I hadn't seen her in a whole lot for a
Yeah.
while,
Hmm.
and I remember when there was the whole people have talked about like Spider-Man, anything with Tobey Maguire, anything with uh Andrew Garfield, and just like the MCU, Deadpool, all this stuff. I know she said like, yeah, I'd be open to coming back as somebody like, a working mother and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, I didn't realize she wasn't in much. I didn't know, but so I'm hoping this gives her an opportunity to do more because now she can play. She showed like she can play this kind of role and really kick ass at it.
Yeah, she was great. I really liked her as well. I think the cinematography, the fight death scenes, those were really done
Yeah.
well.
Yes.
But the journalism rule number 9, Nick, we like to talk about journalism rules here. Never insert yourself or fellow media members into the story.
Hmm.
This is aging the best because Lee follows it, and then it's broken almost at every turn by Jesse.
Yeah, she had quite a few times where she incorporated Jesse into it all. But yeah, it was really like, and that you can argue too is like this is like a kid trying to make a name for themselves, and this is
Hmm.
someone who has done it by the book and made the name for themselves already.
Well, and to people who maybe aren't in the journalism industry, you may not see the big difference in photojournalism and journalism, but there is, right? It's like
Mhm.
it's photojournalism is very different from photography, right? You're
Yeah,
not you're not just trying to capture a great photo, you're trying to tell something, take something that's going to tell a story.
yep.
Who's the guy who used to work at, or probably still does, but we used to work with at the Standard Times, Peter. um
Oh, it
he
was like
always did the front page stuff, but he was an amazing photojournalist. He was the man. Like he got these great angles and was able to tell these great stories that captured the city of New Bedford in its essence. And he won all of these awards. He's amazing, but he does a great job of that. And then
Pereira.
Peter Ferreira, of course, yeah,
Pereira, yeah.
Portuguese Peter Pereira.
Yes.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great photographer, great
Yeah.
photojournalist.
Yeah.
But there is a difference between being a photographer and a photojournalist there, and it seems like Jessie is more of the photographer when she's like taking a picture of Lee, who's taking a picture. But to contrast that, Lee, in that moment at the gas station, she kind of does a great job of separating herself from the subjects when that guy who's got the gun and she's like, let me take your picture. And then
Yeah.
immediately kind of captures that moment where Lee is still kind of like shocked by everything, or while Jesse's still shocked by everything.
Yeah, and it was you're absolutely right. Like in the trying to tell a story in one image, and I think that's such a like I personally like in high school when I was working at the paper, I had to do a little bit of photography stuff, but not a ton. But it's wild some of the challenging things. And I know as you get better cameras and stuff like that, certain things get easier from like a sports standpoint. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
from this kind of stuff, it's like you want to if you can get one image that's just like an encapsulation of the event that you went to. And this what they're doing here with war, it's just like that image that Lee got at the gas station. I wouldn't be surprised if like other than the president one, but that's just because it's so high profile. That gas station one might have been like the best one that she got.
That's an award where you have two people bloodied, hanging, and a guy again, like a prized, buck or whatever. Yeah. Standing in front of it with his AR-15 or machine gun. Like that's really a strong photo. Sends a strong message there, right? So I think that's pretty cool. And then you also have, I think it's right after that moment where they're back in the car, and she's saying you don't have time to ask yourself those questions. You just have to go. And you can't think about it. You can't think about what's going to happen to that person if I don't make that decision, right? Because that was the question that he asked, right? He's like, you pick the one who has to die. You can even flip a coin, and that's when Jesse kind of freezes. So she's like, oh, like, did I kill that person? Was that my fault? Did I didn't intervene? Did I do something? And those are all like really reasonable questions to ask, especially if you're in, like a wartime journalist.
Yeah, that's the thing that like that's what's kind of happened to just the state of it all in general. Like, we focus mainly on the sports, our sports corner of the world of it all, but
it's easier.
It's easier. Sure. It's so much safer to like, you can let your emotions get in there. And it's almost like some people want to have that. Like, that's why sports talk radio is so big in in the sports side of things, especially in our neck of the woods. But when you're talking about real stuff, it's like it all impacts you, especially for someone like that in that moment for Jesse as a young, aspiring photographer. But it's just, you're not supposed to do that. Like, you're supposed to, you're supposed to be like logging everything, taking facts, and trying to tell everything correctly and accurately and do it all justice, whether it's in written form or visual form.
Yeah, and when they talk about their parents both living on a farm and not being invested into it and hoping that it's just like pretending like it's gonna all wash away, they almost talk like in disdain, like they kind of like look down on that opinion. But it's a really interesting question because they're going through all of this, and ultimately for what? And that's what I think what Jesse or what Lee is dealing with, Kirsten Dunst is dealing with at the end of that movie, is that she's losing everyone around her. There's so much death around her. And for what? Like, what is she solved? I think one line that she says was like, every photo that I took that I sent home from wherever she was, the war in Iraq or something, I was hoping that was going to be a message to the people back home that like, we can't do this, but obviously they're there now. So like what message was actually heard? And it felt like she was like giving up on life as much as she was sacrificing herself for Lee at that moment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing where it's like, we got that in the trailer, that quote from Kirsten Dunst from Lee, but at the same time, it didn't at all take away. Like, it just accurately like set the tone for the whole movie. And it's just like a little, like it's a small part of it, but it's a really good, like a microcosm of the whole movie.
Yeah.
The only other things for me, I think, to the general view of this movie, because as I mentioned, like, talk to other people about this movie beforehand, and it was in like, there's like, I don't want to support that just because it's a charged time, it's a charged movie, all this stuff. But I do think if things ever start to chill out a little bit, people will watch this and be like, this is a pretty good representation of like that time, like of what things could have been if we didn't kind of get our shit together. And at the same time, again, like you and I have talked about, we didn't know going into this movie if they were going to be like, reason X, Y, and event Z are what led to us being where we are now. While there are things that were lightly touched upon, we don't know the sides that people were on, other than the sides that are displayed in these four different branches. And even one of them, we don't know a whole hell of a lot of throughout this movie. So I think time will be kind to this movie where 70 from an audience on a charged movie, that's actually a pretty damn good score. Critics, I'm surprised that they dipped all the way down to 81, but again, that's not a bad score. I just think it was, I would have expected more in the range that where you had it. Like, I know I was very high on it, but I do think like 87, like how are you ever going to complain about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, but I remember I was talking to my father-in-law about this prior to going to see it, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to go see it next weekend," and pulled up the trailer for him. And he's an older guy, love him, he's awesome. Fox News dad, though, like so many of our parents are, I think. But so I show him the trailer, and he's immediately like, "No, this is propaganda." And I can get that from the trailer. I can certainly see on a surface level there are, allusions to the president being Donald Trump in some ways, fascist president, wanting to shoot journalists sight unseen. That's not something that Trump has said, but that's been rhetoric surrounding Trump throughout his 4 years as president, and then everything afterwards. So there's a lot of things. The Antifa massacre, again, you don't know who the massacre was. Was it Antifa doing the massacring, or was it Antifa getting massacred?
That's a good point. Yeah.
And that's something where your bias can kind of make you, it's kind of choose your own adventure type thing. So I think those things are really interesting. My last bit about Lee and the state of journalism there, because they're objective observers, right? They're not really interfering. They're just there to capture the story, to be able to tell it back home. But there's a weird, I don't know what the word is, but symbiosis between shooting guns and shooting photography. And they're talking about getting the shots, but how much blood is on your hands? And I think that's what Lee is dealing with there, because you're not intervening. And though your job tells you not to, your human instinct is to help your fellow human.
Yeah.
And how much, death do you cause or indirectly cause, or not help with? And I think that in some ways is a bigger moral question than being a soldier, because a soldier, you're choosing a side, whether it's right or wrong. You have another person on the other side of the aisle who's shooting a gun at you or pointing a gun at you, so it's either him or me, but from that objective observer standpoint, you're not picking a side, then you should just be pro-human. Right, and maybe that's oversimplification, but
it's like, as I was watching it, I was like, okay, she's taking on this role to the letter of the law of like what you're taught as a journalist, like a big J journalist. Like I like, that's okay. That to me, and for you as well, it's like that says a lot about the person that we're dealing with. I guess people who have like gone to school for this stuff, we don't know many people that are like that. That takes a lot. And whether you want to say it's good or bad, like that takes a lot for someone to be that kind of way.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's like the best type of journalism. I mean, like I wanted to get into sports, but I always loved like the gonzo journalism, like kind of going like what Channel 5 News does, the Andrew Callahan guy, all gas, no brakes.
I actually don't think I know that.
He talks to like people on the fringes. He talks to homeless people and like people who are like drug addicts in Philadelphia. He did the January 6th stuff. He did QAnon stuff. So he's done like a bunch of different things. He's a pretty popular. I would call him a journalist there, but like speaking to people who don't have a voice, or who are often maybe mislabeled or categorized a certain way, and letting them tell their story. That's what I always found interesting, but it's like very tough to get people to believe you. You got to put yourself in harm's way. And I have a lot of respect for that.
Yeah. It's not neat. Like I remember watching The Newsroom, like right after I got out of college. Maybe I was still in it a little bit, but like I watched it. I was like, do I want to do like real, like news? Do I actually want to try and do that? Like, but then after I was like, no, stop. Like you do not want to do this, because that's yeah, it's crazy. I mean,
I did it for a little bit at the Standard Times on a very small scale, but you're trying to interview like gang members, or like homeless people, or even just like people who work down on the fishing docks, like the fishermen. Like that's like a tough industry to break into, because they are so close knit, and like just like any other group, like they don't really like outsiders coming in.
Sure, it's tough. It is. So yeah, and that's where like sports, like you can't, like you can kind of treat it like, oh, I want to be unbiased and stuff like that. And I mean, I definitely like had moments where I was like, I try and be analytical. So then you're just trying to be like, this is what's happening, but at the same and try and be like fair to what you're seeing. But it's also still like, this is like we're playing in a fucking sandbox.
Yeah.
With this stuff, it's not even like, and that's where I get frustrated. Where it's like, First Take can do whatever the heck it wants, or talk radio can do whatever the heck it wants. But
yeah,
like,
because that's not journalism. That's like journalism adjacent.
And I understand like some like there are like the athletes or people. I get all that, but at the same time, it's a lot different than the other stuff that we see like on other, like actual news networks. Like this is like real stuff, and it impacts like everybody, not just like an athlete in their family. Like it's just world of difference. Like, fans, it's like you're like, oh, we pissed off the the Red Sox fans, or like the Royals fans today. It's like they're gonna live. Like their team will go and win tomorrow, and then they won't. And then they'll just laugh in your face, and it's not a big deal. It's not that's not what this is. But yeah, it's So yeah, it was very like it. I'm very like as we're talking about it more and more, Wes. Like I'm really excited to go back and rewatch this, because the whole bit with Lee that you just broke down, it's like. So she starts having that crisis after, again, I'm blanking on after Sammy dies.
Yeah.
Like she has that whole thing. And obviously it's the big scene of the assault on the Capitol, but she was ready for it. But it's like he intervened in a moment where they were fucked. And, and again, it was just their friends. So it does change things a little bit, but I can't, if I was in her shoes, I can't help but think like, you probably have like a existential crisis. Like, could I have saved, like you said, could you have saved some people?
Blood in your hands. Yeah.
Changes a lot. But
no,
yeah,
I agree.
This will age. This movie all around is going to age really well.
Okay, I'm with you on that. I wasn't sure if this movie would age completely well, and then who knows? We can't predict the future. If this movie actually plays out and does age well, literally, then it won't age well for me. If that
no, that's kind of like where we, as we get into like what's going to age worst from this movie, I still think there will always be people who think this is too on the nose, even if things like, don't get, obviously we don't want it to get to where this movie is in real life, but even if it doesn't get there, people will still say like that, that wasn't great that it came out during this time. We didn't need that kind of shit. And like, no one needs to see that now, because who knows if don't poke the bear, don't awaken the beast. And that's kind of like where you were talking about on one side, you're hearing like propaganda. I'm hearing it on the other side, where it's like, we don't need people thinking like this. Like, and this is the way to go about it. So it's like, there's like three sides to this. There's like, the side that you were just talking about, the side that I'm seeing. And then there's like us in the middle, where we're seeing this and taking it in. And it's like, it's just how it's funny. How it makes sense that it happened that way. It's always, there's one side and another, and then there's something in the middle usually.
And that's the sign of a great movie, right? If you ask three people and they have three different opinions about it, and you can't really shut down those thoughts, because I think they're all valid, right? Whether you think it's propaganda, or whether you think like, oh, I don't want to give people a playbook on how to actually do this, or to look at it from like the bird's eye view. I think it's all fair game.
And I think that's why I gave this such a high grade, is like, you need to be in like a very specific, like you need to hit certain things perfectly for this to be like received well by potentially received well by anybody. And they did that. And that's what blew me away. But I know you have more things that like, that was my big thing. Like there will always be people who just like don't want to see it, or even if they watch it, they'll feel like, like it's just, I don't need any of that. But you have more for what may age worse from this.
Yeah, I think the thing that stood out to me the most, this is kind of a nitpick, but the group seemingly not carrying, I kind of alluded to this a little earlier, the group seemingly not carrying a first aid kit of any kind, despite being all worn, torn journalist veterans. They just let Sammy die. They just throw him in the back truck, and then just slow. I mean, they don't try to do any triage or anything like that to kind of clot the wound or cover it up. They just slowly let him bleed out in the back of a truck while they're driving through a forest fire.
Yeah, that's actually really. Like, I didn't think about it.
They just like let him like slowly die.
Yeah, that's weird, because like you would think like Kirsten Dunst goes and sits in the back and then tries to deal with it, or Mora's character Joel. Like one of them would you want them to try and take care of it.
I didn't think about, is Pedro Pascal's character in The Last of Us, is he also named Joel?
Yes, he is.
Oh my god, because it's like very similar just in the setting of the movie, right? Because it's like kind of a post-apocalyptic United States.
Yeah, I honestly I'm guilty of this at times, like not like with movies like this, not necessarily knowing the characters' names, like this is like, or I'll forget when we do it here. And I definitely like it did, when I said that to you about the Pedro Pascal Wagner Moura stuff, I didn't realize that the character's name was Joel as well.
Yeah, so that's a little eerie, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
We talked about Jessie. I thought she was an intriguing character where I loved some of the things she did, but she was also frustrating, probably on purpose. And the root of all the problems occur. We talked about Wagner Joel being a writer. What was he, a producer or on-air reporter? Not spending more time in the cities. We get a little bit in New York, and then obviously the assault on Washington there. But, they mentioned Philadelphia kind of being a war zone, and kind of they have to go around that and bypass it completely. We spend a lot of time in the country. I would have liked a little bit more time in the city. You get the suicide bomber in New York to start things off, but I have the background here with the Statue of Liberty with the sniper machine guns at the top there. Something like that. That's just promotional art, but something like that would have been really cool to see in New York as well. But that's Nick picking nits.
We haven't talked about that, like the suicide bomber. Like that was insane, dude. Like, that's part of what made this movie so good. And I think I think I saw this from what is it, Garland at some point. Like they wanted to have, like, where you're having those moments where like, oh, this thing's about to happen, something bad is about to happen, but the thing happens like right before you're ready for it. Like you can't prepare. And it's like, because that's how life is. And like that was a moment. Stuff in Jesse Plemons' scene was that as well. So it was just like they had other examples of that, but those were two that was just like they just fucking hit you like a ton of bricks and you weren't ready.
Yeah, and this is something that I thought will age the worst prior to seeing this movie, and I still feel this way strongly, but foreigners making criticism on another country's politics. Although I think what Garland is effective here by staying unbiased as much as he can, he also brings in a bunch of different things that could be applied into foreign war or foreign country civil wars. Yeah. When you see, like, they mentioned Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein and the civil unrest there, but like they were treated like dogs. There's a whole bit from Shane Gillis where Donald Trump is talking about one of the guys that they killed. I think it was an Al Qaeda or an ISIS leader. And he's like, he died like a dog. And he just goes like 45 minutes, like talking about how he was brutally murdered by like the canines, essentially. So like the way that the president goes out, or the way that they like pose with them in like a hunter's type of mentality, I think it's troubling to see because it's American and it's happening in the country, but that's something that happens in war-torn countries all the time.
Yeah.
So I think it's like an effective way of kind of like taking little pieces of history that have had recent events that have happened all over the world, and they're just applying it in the US.
Yeah. There's definitely there are things about it that felt like this is specific to America, but absolutely like this could be anywhere that's going through something like this.
Absolutely. Best performance by a side character, Jesse Plemons. Come on.
This isn't even a comment. Yeah, it's not even a conversation. Not even close.
Apparently, so I don't know if we mentioned this before the show or at the top of the show, but Plemons, was a last minute replacement for whoever was supposed to play the role. So they called up, Kirsten Dunst, hey, get your husband over here. So, but what's even cooler than that, from what I heard, is that no one really knew that he was going to be on set. He just showed up on set and then also in character. So he just like came right out onto it. So so all of that stuff, it was like them feeling it for the first time.
That's awesome.
Which I think again is effective to kind of show that like steeliness or that anxiety that's felt between the two parties.
God, he was terrifyingly good.
Who lost the movie?
I mean, obviously, like the president is an easy one to say, but I think Tony, the character played by Nelson Lee, so he's the guy that did in the car switch. He's the guy that made this switch over. And then on top of it too,
he's the long hair guy, right?
Yes, and then the other guy was Bohai, like you said, like Evan Lai. Like those guys, they lost the movie, but I would say Tony a little bit more so because he just like, he felt like where Bohai, was scared and obviously, dies. And like, again, that was another, like the timeliness of it. But for Tony, he also has to sit in grief for a moment and go through this, like, panic where he's like crying and can't talk and all these things. It was just like, that was a very well acted scene by Nelson Lee,
Mhm.
but it was also like this is tough, man. Like,
Right, because he's in shock of losing his friend, but he also knows his fate too. Is the moment that he
yeah,
asks him where's he's from. So
yeah, because
it's just like a ticking time bomb. You know, he knows what's going to happen.
that's actually a really good way to put it. Ticking time bomb because of like how he was crying and just like, couldn't. It was such uncontrollable sobbing.
Hmm.
And the thing for me too is like when if we're ever faced with that moment, you hope you go out like you go out like with pride or something to that degree. Like you don't go down like that. So like that's not easy either. So
Yeah, that's tough. It's a tough
well
way to
done by
go out.
Nelson Lee, but Tony, tough go for you, dude.
Yeah, you said the president was a little bit of an easy choice. I got an easier one. America.
Yeah, that's
Tough,
true.
yeah, big loser in it all, right? No one
Mm.
wins in a war. But we do have a winner of wars here, and a winner of who won this movie.
Yeah, so I think that Kaylee Spanny, I've never seen her before.
No, she was really good. She looked, and she didn't look like 20 when they said she was 23. I was like, no way. She had this real like baby face look to her. At least
Yeah,
in the movie, they said she was 23.
she is 25.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, turning 26 this year. So she's definitely young, but like it was she did an outstanding job because again, I'm thinking she's young the whole time. It's like like what's this person gonna do? And she like I always go in now thinking like I don't know when we see younger, but obviously this isn't a child actor. Still, she did a great job regardless.
Mhm.
Kirsten Dunst, huge winner for this. I really hope again she gets like a nice resurgence.
Yeah, I
to
thought
her
she was
career.
really good too. Yep.
And then I think A24 is a big winner individually because they resolve things with the writer strike like sooner than everybody else. And I feel like we're just constantly seeing stuff from them now.
Oh, that's interesting.
And,
Yeah.
and this is another big, like, again, like monetarily, I don't know what the budget was. We
It
didn't,
was the highest budgeted movie in A24 history. It was $50 million. So they're trying to scale up now too, is from what I understand.
gotcha. So, okay. So they've made that money back. And I, maybe they'll get to that like successful range that we talk about of like, what is it,
Mhm.
1.5, I think is what it is,
I
or
think
double?
with like the marketing included. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
something like that. So you're at least breaking even. So they're like around that range. But yeah, so like I think that over time, like this is a movie people will watch more. But then I think Garland too. And as a writer, like I know now knowing more like of what he's written, I'm going to seek out more work of his when in stuff that I haven't seen too.
Absolutely. I think just like America was the loser, the winner is those who want to see America's downfall.
Hmm. Yeah.
This could be like porn for them, potentially. But I thought Dunst was really good too. I think she was the big winner of this. Played the different emotions and kind of like the hardened, grizzled, cynical reporter really well, which is a real trope, a real stereotype in that journalism world.
Yes. Yeah. She did. Yeah. I really hope she gets more opportunities from this. Very well done.
Okay, so I gave it an 87. Nick gave it a 96. Geez, what's the math on that there? Let's say a 92.
91.5. Look at you.
Oh, look at that. We'll round up there. Call it a 92. So that's Civil War, the Alex Garland A24 movie, not the MCU movie or retrospective on the Great War that took place with Abraham Lincoln.
Hmm.
So go see it in theaters while it's still there, because I do think this is a theater movie.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about that much, but the sound, and this was made for IMAX, is my understanding. So
Oh,
if you have the opportunity to see an IMAX, that's probably the best way to immerse yourself into the role, because the movie does really grab the audience by the collar from the get-go, and to be fully immersed with the sound and everything is probably the best bet.
that's a good call. I will enjoy watching it at home later, but you should see it in theaters one time. Good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's shift over to the Discharge Depot. Get your tickets, ladies and gentlemen.
Choo-choo, bitches.
All right, I'll go first here, since you talked a little bit about C2E2 in the comic book minute, but it was my wife's birthday over the weekend, so
Oh,
fun things. I had a nice fancy dinner, just the two of us on Saturday night, and then hung out with her family on Sunday. Also got some yard work. I mentioned, got some bird houses, put those up, got some bird seed. The squirrels are already going after the bird seed, so we'll see how that goes. But shaping the backyard right now.
the squirrels, They love to do that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I know. Yeah.
happy birthday to the missus. Give her our best.
Of course.
But that's awesome. That sounds like a nice little
Yeah, the
weekend.
weather's starting to get nice out, so we're working.
Yeah, that's it is getting nice out. It's like the shift. Like one day was like 70. I don't know if it was here 70 or Chicago 70, but it was like cold when we first not cold, but like a little chilly when we first got there. And then by the end of it was like warm. I'm actually sweating right now, sitting in my place in New Hampshire.
I'm a
So
little warm myself, actually.
well, look at that.
Look at that.
But yeah, so yeah, I mentioned before, went to C2E2, spent the weekend in Chicago, had a really nice time. Again, highly recommend it for anybody who's big into comics, especially because I think with these events, they have certain things that they lean into more. And I know like New York Comic Con is more comics central, whereas San Diego is more movies and entertainments centric. Does that say like Chicago still had Josh Brolin, Amy Jo Johnson, Mads
Oh, wow.
Mikkelsen. Like there's still plenty of people.
Josh Brolin, that's a big name.
Yeah, Maya Hawke was there.
Yeah, okay.
So there's others like within that's a pretty big range. So there's plenty of people still there. There's plenty of celebrities still there, but compared to Boston, I first was introduced to cons with Rhode Island Comic Con. I had fun with that. But as I started doing this show and then started doing TLDR, I wanted to like see more creators, and there are creators that go to Rhode Island, but it's not like they're names that you may not be as familiar with or maybe not up and coming necessarily. Then I went to Boston, and you start seeing more up and coming names, more familiar names. So you can kind of start like getting to know people, talking to them, get some stuff signed, whatever. And while there's like a good range, you go to Chicago and it's on that note alone, it's probably like 4 times the size of like for the people that were there. So it was pretty crazy on that front. The panels were awesome. We got Something Is Killing the Children is a big like comic from Boom Studios. We got some updates on that. That one I think it was optioned for an animated show, and then like that's older news, that part. And then with Radiant Black, the Massiverse, we got more news on that front. And then just making connections, getting to know some people, seeing people that we've interviewed before, and then seing them in person was also just fun.
That's cool. Yeah, absolutely.
One of the guys like saw us right away. He's like, "Oh, look at that! You're real people, yeah, not just fucking talking heads." But yeah, it's
not AI.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and then just getting cool stuff. Like I got a ton of comics, a ton of them signed. And just had an absolute blast, and I highly recommend it. And Chicago's great. Chicago's a great city to visit.
This might be a dumb question, but what does C2E2 stand for?
Oh, it's like
Comic-Con and Eager Entertainment.
There's something. What is? Yeah, that I need to like Google that. But I remember seeing it at some point. Like it has it's Chicago Comics. No. I think there's Chicago Entertainment Comics in there, like something to that degree. I'm not sure exactly. But yeah, all these names have changed like over the years. I think if you look up Chicago Comic Con, you'll like if for anybody who's like
redirected.
Yeah, you'll find that there. Like because like Boston is like there's something like is it Wicked Con or something like that happens, but Boston Fan Expo. Yeah, Boston Fan Expo is the big one.
Okay.
So yeah, but it's like San Diego and New York, and then from what my understanding, there's Emerald City, which I think is Portland, and then Chicago and Baltimore. Like that's like the next tier. So I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if Boston is on the tier underneath those two, I think.
Okay. All right. Well,
But
yeah,
every
there
time
we go.
I talk to people about Boston, they're always like, that whether we've seen them there or people from C2E2, like, oh yeah, we love visiting Boston. So if more creators want to come to Boston, by all means.
Well, I'm sure it's a lot like how we view Chicago. Great city to visit, right? It's like if you're there in the summertime, you go catch a Red Sox game, you catch a Cubs game. You're right on Lake Michigan. You're right on the Atlantic Ocean there, the Boston Harbor, seaport. So a lot of similarities I could see.
Distinct food. Yeah. But actually, we had a driver who we told we were from Massachusetts, and he said, "I've only been out eat once, and I went out east once." And I went to the wrong city. I went to New York. And
yeah, New York can be overwhelming.
Yeah, it is. It's like that's the best way to put it. Quite honestly.
Yeah, a lot of fun there. A lot of fun to be had, but it's a lot of energy.
Yes.
Speaking of energy, we have on our episode guide. We have the Fall Guy exit survey as a maybe.
Ooh, Fall Guy. Okay. I think honestly we may see that this weekend. So I'm forgetting that we had this plan. Like,
Yeah,
Lauren and I were
yeah.
talking about it. So I'm
Okay.
open to that. Yeah.
All right, I think we can do that. I might bring the lady too. See if she wants to come along for it. Should be a nice date flick.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it looks really good. I was like, when it first got announced, I was like, what is this? But now it's like, as we've gotten some more details about it, and it's Gosling and Emily Blunt. Yeah, I'm very interested.
I love it. Okay, so let's pencil that in there. And then if the ladies do come, let's get an opinion from the ladies. Let's get a score.
I will ask her. Yes, I will get. Yes, that I can get. She won't come on the show, but she'll do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I won't allow Jules to come on. She's like, why can't I come on the podcast? And I'm like, no.
Wait, you remember the Kourtney Kardashian phase?
That's what I said. I said
Yeah.
she had a whole segment on there.
Yeah. Only the real Change My Mind listeners know what we're talking about there.
The OGs, right?
Yes.
Keeping up with the Kardashians, something like that.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Well, yeah, this was great. I really enjoyed it. We went a little long, but this movie had a lot to unpack here. You need to let this movie breathe a little bit.
Yes, that's why I'm glad that we don't always do the news stuff, because it's like there's so much.
This would have been like a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah, or would have just rushed. I would have rushed myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, same bat time, same bat place, as always, ladies and gentlemen.